Hello, I'm Mark Crutcher. Welcome to LifeTalk for this week, and I'm joined by the usual suspects here, my trusty sidekick here at Life Dynamics, Renee Hobbs. Hello, Rennie.
Hello.
And from Texas Right to Life, we have Melissa Conway. Hello, Melissa.
Hello,
Thank you
how
for
are
being
you?
here. And her trusty sidekick, or whatever, is that what you refer to her to, as trusty sidekick?
I'll
Elizabeth
take it.
McClung. Hello, Elizabeth.
Good morning.
We got a great show and we're going to be telling some people here, some things here in a minute that I think is going to be really shocking to hear, for people to hear. It's really exciting. But first, we're going to take 2 minutes out for Life in 120.
In an attempt to gain millennial votes, Democratic Vice Presidential candidate Tim Kaine has reaffirmed his support for legalized abortion. Pro-life advocates say that this exposes his claim to be a practicing Catholic is a fraud. They also point out that this political strategy could backfire since recent polls show far more millennials supporting the pro-life position than the pro-choice position. Phoenix, Arizona Bishop Thomas Olmsted has issued a statement that politicians who use their position to support abortion are, quote, materially cooperating in grave sin, unquote. Meanwhile, in a move approved by the Pope, the Vatican has issued a statement that merely helping to arrange for an abortion is an obstacle to ordination as a Catholic priest, even if the man was not Catholic at the time the event occurred. The owner of a new abortion mill in Oklahoma City says she hopes to kill 1,500 babies in the first year of business and increase that number to 3,000 annually within the next few years. Owner Julie Burkhart was an associate of notorious late-term abortionist George Tiller in Wichita, Kansas, and says that she too will offer late-term procedures at her Oklahoma death camp. The Arkansas Pregnancy Resource Center in Little Rock was founded in 1987, and in 2009 it relocated to a facility directly across the street from the state's only surgical abortion clinic. Now, in anticipation that the abortion clinic might one day move, Nicole Lashbrook, executive director of the center, says they are going to add a mobile ultrasound unit so they can serve women wherever they might be in the community. The effort is in partnership with Save the Storks, a Colorado-based group that helps crisis pregnancy centers acquire buses equipped with ultrasound. I'm Renee Hobbs. This has been Life in 120. For more daily updates, visit us at prolifeamerica.com.
All right, we've got a special guest joining us from the Atlanta area, and it's someone who went to one of my seminars 20-something years ago in Massachusetts, I think he said. Anyway, his name is John Ensor. Hello, John. How are you, sir?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us. You called the other day to get permission from me to use our animation video, which you've been using in China, and translating it into Chinese. And you told me about a really exciting thing going on that I hadn't heard of, and I suspect most of our audience hadn't heard of it. Y'all hadn't heard of it before, had you?
No, we have not.
Tell us what's going on in China there, John.
Well, you know, China is a huge country, and it's a communist country, and the people have lived under the oppression of a one-child policy there for over, 35 years now. It's recently been changed to a two-child policy, but life is hard in China, and when you consider the pro-life issue or abortion is concentrated in China in a level that is not seen anywhere else in the world because of the one-child policy. So that's the bad news. The good news is that there's also an enormous, high, fast-growing underground or unregistered church movement within China. Many, many people are coming to the Christian faith, and they're very well organized. And in the last 4 or 5 years, there are lots of indications in China where that Chinese church, which now numbers anywhere from 70 to 120 million believers in China, are taking up the issue of life and the sanctity of life and trying to figure out how to make a stand for life where they live. That's a pretty big story.
You're telling me that, or were you indicating, or did I misunderstand, there's actually now starting to be somewhat of embryonic stages of a CPC movement, or a crisis pregnancy center movement?
Yes, there is. The first pregnancy center that I'm aware of in China was started about 3 years ago inside a hospital, actually. The hospital does about 170 abortions a month at this hospital. And the hospital president invited some people to come in, and when he learned what a pregnancy medical clinic looked like in other parts of the world, he invited people to come in and set up a pregnancy education and counseling center in the room next door to where they do all the abortions. So some people went in there and trained the local community Christians, and they've been running a pregnancy center inside this hospital now for the last 3 years. And they're starting to see and experience some of the same victories and wonderful miracle stories that pregnancy centers have been producing here in the States for the last 45 years.
Well, let me ask you a question. What real opportunity does a crisis pregnancy center have if the woman is there under the force of the government to have an abortion because it's her second or third child? How can that CPC actually help?
Well, it can help in a lot of ways. I think the number one way you need to understand is that nobody really, there are official laws and policies, and there's workarounds. And in most communist countries, life goes on by workarounds. And so there are official exemptions to the one-child policy if you're a farmer or if you're a particular ethnic group of people where they need stability, and so they don't want to push the one-child policy. In many cases, you can go in and have a second child and the government not know that it's a second child. So there's a lot of complexity to this, but the reality is that many, many women, even women having their first child, can be pressured by their circumstances to abort their baby and can be rescued in the same way a young girl attending University of Austin can get pregnant and go into a pregnancy center and feel torn between pursuing her college career or having a baby, becoming a mother, placing for adoption. So some of those pressures are the same.
Wow.
The CPCs, are there counselors there to help these women that have had forced abortions?
Well, the same kind of dynamic that happened here in the States are going to happen over there, and that is, first of all, many of the people who come forward to be a counselor to women who are pregnant are themselves what we call post-aborted. And so coming to terms with what abortion is, making peace with that, being able to go forward in life, this is all part of what needs to take place in China if the pro-life movement in China is going to take off, because almost everyone in China.
Now, John, as I understand it, when you called the other day, you wanted permission to take the Life Dynamics animation video and dub it into Chinese. Is that your next project? Now, you told me you'd been to China, 20 times over the last few years?
Yes, and I'm over there now as a consultant to various groups of people right now working in medical context where they want to set up pregnancy counseling offices.
Wow.
Now that the government has approved this idea legally, it's an opportunity for hospitals then to better serve the women, because they know that a lot of women come in and actually will want their babies and with a little help would have their babies. And, of course, hospitals make more money delivering babies than they do aborting babies, so it's not even a financial challenge.
Now, are you suggesting that the Chinese government now is kind of either approving of these centers, or they're winking and nodding and looking the other way, or how is that working?
No, the Chinese government has officially sanctioned what we call a nonprofit organization, what they call in China as an NGO. And an NGO application was filed a year ago, or a little less than a year ago, and it was government approved. And this NGO now has official government approval to set up what they're calling Good Neighbors Pregnancy Education Centers, wherever that community wishes to have one. And so they're taking the model that began in the hospital and taking it to other hospitals. And then they're going to be training people within that community to run those counseling centers and to start offering direct personal assistance and counseling to women coming in for their abortions at the hospitals.
Wow.
And the video that you guys use, is very medically accurate, non-graphic, and so it's an excellent educational tool to go along with the science of fetal development that is also part of the education process. So these are some of the key tools that this organization wants to be able to use in China to educate women about their pregnancy and educate women about what abortion is and the procedure they would be undergoing. In that process, if they have hesitations, want to change their mind, then there are other options then to start to help them find a life-affirming solution.
Wow.
The UN has well documented and well researched the gender side that takes place in China. And with the CPCs that now exist in China, have you seen a decrease in the cultural preference for males, or at least a beginning of an erosion of this cultural preference for males?
No, not really. It's a country with 1.3 billion people, and there's one pregnancy center that's up and running in one city. So don't think of it as multiple events. Just look at it as a foothold and a precedent being set that over the next 10, 15 years could produce many, many pregnancy centers and start to alter the opinions of everyday people, and it can spread out from there. In many ways, the way the pro-life movement in America has done the same thing.
Well, that's great. And I'll tell
So
you.
it's going to take a long time, but
Right.
you start with exposing abortion and the whole gendercide issue with people who are most sensitive to the life issue, which has been the underground church in China.
Well, I am very flattered that you chose the Life Dynamics animation. We've been very successful with that here in the United States. As close as I can figure, we've put out about 300,000 of those DVDs over the years, and we know that they've saved a lot of babies, and we make them available very cheaply to crisis pregnancy centers, and they give them out for free, and they use them for education. We also know that they've been used in a couple of medical schools here in the United States to train med students. So
That's right.
we're very flattered that you chose that, and certainly you're more than welcome to use it any way you can, because saving a Chinese baby is just as important as saving an American baby. They're all babies in God's eyes, and he doesn't make a distinction between a Chinese baby and a Texas baby even. So,
That's for sure.
although we're Texans, so we might make that distinction, but God doesn't. So.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of our movement. We do have the truth on our side, and the truth has a much power on secular people as it would be on people of faith. So in a place like China, if you bring good fetal science to it, and you bring good medicine, and you educate people according to what's going on, and you can put it in the context of a hospital, but then you can wrap all of that objectivity around warm, caring individuals who are really there to help you find a better solution, you've got the very same dynamics that happen inside our own pregnancy centers here in America.
Right. Well, I appreciate it, and we really laud what you're doing over there. I mean, it's very heroic, and maybe we're sitting here telling people about the beachhead that you've established, and maybe 10 years from now there'll be 1,000 CPCs in China. Who knows? But
Yeah.
at least we've got it going.
That's right. Got to get on the beach first.
We'll just pray for your safety and protection among you and everybody else that goes down there with you, and that more CPCs will open up.
We know that they are.
Yeah,
We're standing on that promise from God that that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And
the key is, remember, these are now Christians in China that are taking the lead.
Yeah.
They really are their own leaders now,
right.
developing their own organization, which is very, very encouraging.
Well, again, John, we really appreciate what you're doing, and we're going to get you the transcript so you can get started on this. And again, I really appreciate your using this information, because this is what we put it out for people to use it for things like this.
Yeah.
Thank you, John. Thanks for joining
Okay,
us.
1,000
John.
blessings. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I mean, that's got to be encouraging that, even in a country like this that was not only pro-abortion but forcing women to have abortion, now the government is kind of saying, well, maybe not. Maybe we'll go this different direction. It's just kind of weird to think that after all these hundreds of thousands of these DVDs that we put out here in the United States, that now they're going to be in China. The same exact thing is going to be in China, saving little Chinese babies.
I've been
Save
sitting
lives.
here awestruck at the thought that this communist government who has had this legalistic approach to ending life, is now recognizing the value of pregnancy centers and allowing them to flourish and to start to grow, where in the United States, we're starting to see the opposite.
Just the opposite.
Yeah.
I was thinking that very thing. I mean,
Yeah, and when we talked to John the other day, he said the government wants marriages saved and he wants babies to be protected, and he said that they are changing now, the government over there. So
The family is the bedrock of society.
maybe what's happening here is that the Chinese government is looking at what the results were in communist Europe. When the Soviet Union collapsed and you started having all these stories come out, and we've talked about it here on LifeTalk before, the average Russian woman or Soviet woman, average now, had 9 abortions during her childbearing years.
yes,
In some regions of Soviet Union, women were having on normally 20 to 25 abortions during their childbearing years.
and it's free. They can just go in,
Walk
and,
in,
and it's done.
they're basically assembly line abortions.
Right.
And they're now seeing all these massive health problems from women. Poland is a good example of that. They've done some studies on it. Now, Poland has basically outlawed abortion. And their health issues involving women have gotten better since they've stopped abortions. Maybe that's what they're doing. They're looking at this. And also there's another issue here that the Chinese may be looking at. We have this tendency to think, well, there's, like he said, 1.3 billion Chinese people. But maybe they're starting to be concerned that that could turn around and they could end up like Europe. And again, I've told people here before, everybody here needs to get a copy of the video Demographic Winter and see what's going on in the world, especially in Europe. You have ghost towns now.
Yes.
In Europe. You have places in Italy
Right.
where whole towns have been abandoned, not because an industry left or the economy collapsed. They just didn't have any people.
The documentary is eye-opening.
It really is. If you watch that documentary, and there's a follow-up called Demographic Bomb, that's the same deal. And there are consequences for this kind of behavior. And I think the United States had better recognize that as a country that was profited by God because it was a Christian country, more than any other country in the history of the world, God's going to hold us to a higher standard than he holds the rest of the world. And we have now killed 55 to 60 million babies. That's going to have an impact on us as well.
Yes, it
And you
is.
start looking at that demographic winter, and we have this nationwide discussion about immigration. Most people don't even know. If you take immigration out of the population, we've lost population over the last 30 or 40 years. Our population is going down. Replacement levels are, 2.2 babies per family or something like 2.3 or something like that, and we're at 1.8. So if you take immigration out, our population is going down. And by the way, this is not opinion. This is math. This is basic demographics that's derived from basic fundamental math. Our nation is getting older and older. The fastest growing population in America is people over 80. That's the fastest growing population in America. And, if you go back to, let's say, 1900, what do you think the average age was for how long a person lived in the United States in the 1900?
40s, 50s?
I would
44. The average person lived to be 44 in 1900. By 2000, it was like 78.2. So we came close to doubling the lifespan of people during that time. And yet we killed, in the last half of the 20th century, 60 million of the offspring that was there to take care of them.
And we've also killed off 60 million taxpayers,
That's right.
which keep an economy afloat
Right.
to take care of Social Security and the caring of our aging.
I was going to bring that up. When Social Security was designed, there were like 42 people who paid in for every person that took out. Now it's about a 1-to-1 ratio. It's getting close to a 1-to-1 ratio. You can't sustain that. Social Security cannot sustain that sort of thing. And if you think about it for a minute, if we're going to kill the unborn child to solve social problems, which is what we've heard about, overpopulation and hunger and homelessness and all that, we're going to kill the unborn child to solve those problems. We've killed 60 million of them, and all those problems are worse. So what's the conclusion from that? If you're going to look at it strictly from a number standpoint, the problem is we killed the wrong 60 million people. We should have been killing older people because they use those services more than the younger people do, and the younger people pay for them.
Well, the slippery slope is, and the reality is, we're there now, where
there.
we're yeah.
We're right there right now. And here's what we better be hoping. And I don't think this is true for a moment, but here's what we better be hoping. That God was just kind of jerking us around, maybe lying to us, when he said, you reap what you sow. Because I want you to think about the baby boomers, the Gen X, and even now the millennials. We've killed 60 million babies so far since January 22nd, 1973. And we did that because they were inconvenient, they were unhealthy, and they were too expensive. Well, guess what? We're all approaching the areas today, especially me, when we're going to be inconvenient, unhealthy, and too expensive. And the generation that we killed off 60 million of, the ones that we didn't kill are going to be making the decisions about how we're dealt with. So if you reap what you sow, that's not good news for the generation of people that killed off these 60 million people. And now they're becoming the political powers in the country, and they're going to be the ones making the decisions. And once we've established this principle that it's okay to kill people to accomplish some kind of social objective.
Well, and financial objective.
Yeah,
It's
well,
too
I'm
expensive
including
to-
that as a
yeah,
social objective, you know, to make the economy better.
Yeah.
Once you've done that, you can't go backwards. You can't kill the unborn child. You can't just separate them out and say, we're going to kill them, you know, at will, and think that that doesn't have consequences for us, and especially when you start looking at these demographic issues. And why are we spending one nickel in this society to extend people's lives? Why are we spending one nickel? If we say we've got a demographic problem of too many older people, why would we be going out here spending money to extend their lives? And at some point, this government's going to figure that out.
They're already
And
figuring it
they're
out.
already figuring it out. Anyway, we're out of time for this show, so we'll see everybody next week. Good show, and we'll see you guys next week as well.
Sounds good.
Thanks for joining us. Until next week, remember, Life Dynamics is not here to put up a good fight. We're here to win, because winning is how the killing stops.